Today we're going to try to do something that is pretty cool. If you're familiar with SpaceX's work, they've recently launched a rocket carrying American astronauts for the first time on American-built rockets to the International Space Station. And in an event coinciding with the launch, they released this app, or more a game online, that simulates the docking operations of the Dragon space capsule with the International Space Station. If you don't know about this, you can find it on iss-sim.spacex.com. And it's just a really cool example of what the docking maneuvers look like in space. It's essentially a pretty simple game, and I thought it would be cool to turn this into a project and using SwiftUI build something very similar for the iPhone. So if this works, we should be able to recreate this experience or something pretty close to it. And with that, let's get started. So we're going to start a new project, single view app, and we're going to call it ISS docking game. And once you've started the project, the way we're going to approach this is going to take us several episodes to get to a final product. But the first thing we're going to do is work on the UI. We're going to create each of these different components. So the buttons, the HUD display, and all of these little indicators are going to be built using paths. And then we're going to put it all together with some logic behind it, so when you press the button, some of these numbers change. And then eventually you get closer and you dock to the ISS, hopefully. So with that, let's start by trying to recreate these buttons. The way that I think it's easier, assuming you're not a graphics designer and you're not going to pull up Photoshop and start actually designing these graphics, we could actually do it using paths in SwiftUI. So this shape is a rather complex shape. It doesn't come prepackaged in SwiftUI, so we're going to have to build ourselves something similar to it. And the way paths work is essentially all shapes can be drawn with a combination of curves and straight lines. So this is a straight line, this is an arc, or a curve that then connects it to another segment, which is a straight line, which again curves a little bit here, and then another line, and so on and so forth. Within this bigger shape, there's a smaller shape, which is a very similar kind of smaller shape that's indicating that's where your finger goes. And then we have a symbol on top, which is this arrow type. So building this will actually take us a little bit of time using paths, and it'll take us playing around with some points to make sure that we get the shape as close as possible to this, even though it probably won't be exact, but it'll work for now. So what we need to do is first organize ourselves a little bit, and we'll do this by creating a folder called UI components. And within there, we're going to create a new file, Swift file, and we're going to call it button 1, let's say, because we'll create other types of buttons. In fact, actually, these are called, I think, translation. So let's call it translation button 1. So once we do that, we're going to import SwiftUI. And what we need to do is build a struct, which is going to be which we're going to call, let's say, position button type 1. It's going to be a shape, and within here we're going to then start creating our path. So we're going to say create a method called path, in rect cg rect, and we're going to return a path, and we're going to create a variable called path, which is a path. And before I forget, we're going to return path. So within here, because this is a path, we're going to have to come up with a combination of points and connect them either with straight lines or with arcs to achieve this, this shape right here. So one way that I think is helpful to do this is come up with a constant, essentially, which is some kind of a corner radius. And what this will do is it'll help us create gaps between the straight segments. And I'll explain this in a little bit. I hopefully become clearer. But because if you look at these straight lines, for example, this straight line right here and this straight line right here, they're not going to be connected. They're connected with an arc. So we need to come up with sort of a radius that this arc can be based on. So if you imagine a circle right here, this arc will be part of a circle around the center. So we need to come up with what is that radius that we want to use to form this arc that connects these straight lines, and similar to here, to here, to here. So that's the reason for this constant, and we can play around with it. 3 seems to work from my previous experience, but it can change, obviously. But back to building the actual shape. Let's go ahead and create a number of points, which we will then go ahead and connect. So for example, here we're going to say, this is all relative to these to the CG rect that we're creating. So we're gonna take the rect, we're gonna say max x divided by 3 minus this corner radius, and then the y is going to be rect dot min y plus corner radius. So why this point? So the naming convention that I'm using is it's TL1, which is top left 1. So this is top left 1, top left 2, top left 3, top right 1, top right 2, and so on. So there's 2 points here. Essentially, there's 2 points here. Everywhere where we have a curved corner, we're going to have 2 points because then we'll connect them with an arc. So here I'm saying, take this rectangle that we're creating, and the size of the rectangle can vary whenever we implement it, but I've typically stuck to a width that is twice as long as the height. So if you imagine a rectangle, we're saying the maximum, so the width of the rectangle divided by 3, and subtract this corner radius from that. So that will give us approximately here. If you imagine a rectangle that's about this big, this is approximately 1/3 of the way across the width of this invisible rectangle. So that's why I'm dividing this by 3. And then the y is the minimum y plus a corner radius, because I don't want it to be at the top of the rectangle. I want it to be a little bit below, because this is also a little bit curved. But you could probably get rid of this as well, and it'll work equally well. So just to recap very quickly, what we have here is a point that is about a third of the way across this rectangle that encapsulates the button, and the y is the minimum y, which is the top of the rectangle. The way the coordinate system works is this is 0, 0, and then x's get bigger to the right, and y's get bigger as you go down. So we've selected a point around here somewhere. Then we're going to create a second point, TL2, and that's going to be a CG point and this one is going to be, essentially, it's going to be very close to it, but it just needs to be a little bit farther away so we can connect it with a curve. So we're going to say divided by 3 plus corner radius and then we're going to say min y. So if you imagine these 2 points, this one is a little bit lower and to the left, this one is a little bit higher, and this one is a little bit higher and to the right. That way we're going to be able, so TL1 is here, TL2 is here. And we're going to then eventually connect these with an arc, and it's going to look like this once we start connecting the points. But first we'll have to build all the other points, but just to demonstrate this point, we'll say path move to TL1. And then we're going to say path add quad. What is the issue? What do we not like? Oh, it's a typo. There we go. So, once we move to TL1, we're going to add a quad curve, and that quad curve is going to go to TL2. And we're going to have a control point that is CG point, and it's going to be x max x divided by 3. The y is going to be rect min y. So if you can imagine a point that is a third of the way across horizontally and at the top here, that's a control point or an anchor point sometimes, and that's what SwiftUI needs in order to be able to curve the line. So as it's drawing a line between the 2 points, it's going to curve it towards this anchor point. And this is what this anchor, this is what the control point is being used for here. So if we very quickly put this into our content view, we'll see what it looks like. So so it's a position button type 1. No, let's see. Position button type 1, there we go. And we're going to say stroke. No. Oh, let's say easy sec. What is this? As you can see up here, it's actually up here. It's very minor, but you can see the beginning of a curve. And as we add more points, we'll start to see the formation of a shape. So essentially, we need to do this for all of these different points and go all the way around. So I'm going to pause the video and actually go through and add all of these points, and then show you what it looks like after that. Okay, so this is what we currently have. After we've added all the different points that form the shape of the button, we have essentially top left 1, top left 2, top right 1, top right 2, right middle 1, right middle 2, left middle 1, left middle 2. And that's all we need to build a shape like this one. And so all that is left now is we need to connect all of them. And so doing that looks something like this. We can just start copying because we're connecting everything, most everything with curves and sometimes with a line. But so essentially we go from top left 2 to top right 1. And we're using a control point of max x divided by 2 because that's the middle of the rectangle. And then for the y, we're going to use rect.minimum y minus corner radius. Then we're going to take that and connect it to top right 2. And we're going to use an anchor point of max divided by 3. It's supposed to be divided by 2. Max x divided by 3 times 2, because now we want to get to about 2/3 away across on the horizontal axis. And then for the y, we're just going to keep it at minimum y. And just to see what this is starting to look like, let's run it and make sure it's forming the outline of a button. There we go. We kind of see the top horizontal curve being formed a little bit. And all that's left is now to keep going. So from here, from this corner, we're going to use a straight line to go from top right to bottom right. And that looks like this, path.add line to rm1. Let's see what that looks like very quickly. Whoa, it looks super big because we haven't given any restriction to this C stack. So let's give it a frame of width 200. Let's keep it smaller. Let's say 80. And a height of, let's say, 40. Let's see what that looks like. There we go. It looks kind of like what we need it to. And let's keep adding to the lines. By the way, these points are something that I played with a lot to make sure it looks right. Obviously, that's very time consuming, so I wasn't going to do it while being recorded. So that's actually where the majority of the time of this video went, rather than actually building it. So anyway, if we keep going, what we want to do is add another curve here. And that one's going to go from right middle 1 to right middle 2. And it's going to use a control point of max x. And it's going to, the y is going to be max y. Max y divided by 3 times 2. This is the same logic as the other one, so you essentially, you want to be 2/3 of the way down approximately based on what the shape looks like, so you kind of eyeball it. You could do, you could do divided by 10 times 6 or something if you want to fine tune it more, but this proportion seems to work for what we're doing today. So from right middle 2, we're going to then go to left middle 1. Left middle 1, and we're going to connect it. We're going to use a control point, which is essentially the bottom middle part of the invisible rectangle. So that's going to be the middle of the x length, and it's going to, for y, we're going to say max y. Whoops. Max y plus corner radius. Let's see what it looks like very quickly to make sure we're not building something terrible. There we go. We have a nice little curve there. And all that's left now is to complete it on the left-hand side. Cool. So we have another curve here, connecting left middle 1 to left middle 2. And the control point we're going to use here is min x divided by 3 times 2, and then max y, max y divided by 3 times 2 again. And then lastly, we're going to connect it with a line back to our starting point, which was TL1. Cool. So let's see now. This should give us the nice little shape of this button. Perfect. So now that we have this path, we can use it, we can color it any way we want. We'll clean this up a little bit. And you can see we're starting to build the beginning of our little control pad here. So now that we have this, what to do next? Essentially, we need 4 of these. And the way we're going to do that is, if you go back to content view, actually what we're going to do is create a new folder, and we're going to call it, let's call it views. There could be better naming convention for this, but let's go with that. And we're going to have a new file here. It's going to be Swift file. We're going to call it translation buttons. Cool. And it's going to be SwiftUI. Okay. So what do we want here? We want a struct. We want a struct, and we're going to call it translation control pad. And it's going to be a view. And we need to have our body, some view. What we want in here is to start building the other buttons. So we're going to call this a couple of different times, or 4 different times to be precise. We need to wrap this in a Z stack because we're going to have several different items in here. And if we do this, what's the issue? There we go. Now, if we take this and plug it into our content view, it should work the same. There we go. It's black now because I haven't given it, I got rid of the color, but it's essentially, this is pulling from this view, and this is the view that we're going to use to add the other buttons. And then we'll worry about colors later. So, okay, what do we want to do with this? So if we add another one, what would that look like? Let's see. So this is going to be this is the top button. This is going to be right. This is going to be left. This is going to be bottom. And if we do that, we need to first rotate this and angle.degrees, double 90. This one will have to rotate degrees, double 180. And finally, this one we have to rotate 270 degrees. Let's see what happens now. Whoa, that's not what's supposed to happen because we haven't moved them around yet. So let's see if we offset these a little bit, what would that look like? So let's say we move it 50 to the right and then 50, let's say, down What does that look like? There we go. That one is now starting to be in the right place. Let's use the same proportions for the other ones, except change it. So this one is on the left, so we want it to go -50 and then 50 down. And this one, we don't want it to go right, but we want it to go 100 down, let's say. That should give us a good spacing. Something's wrong. I think we just need to move things around. What's wrong? Because this is flipped around. Okay, so 180, 270. There we go. Looks pretty close to this one. All right, that's our first video, and we'll keep, on the next videos, we'll keep adding the different shadings and symbols on top of the buttons. We'll obviously position it where it needs to go. We'll add the functionality of clicking on it and colors changing when you click on it. But I just wanted to start this and show you where we're going. So hopefully you guys like it, and tune in for the next one.